We are very honored to have in our midst right now the Honorable Ed Fast, my former boss, and the Premier of my former province, because now I reside in Ontario, the Right Honorable Jean Charest, who will say a few words. Mr. Charest.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Gauthier. Ladies and gentlemen, first let me say how delighted I am to join you today. And I've been given a very, very interesting and a very pleasant task of introducing one of Canada's most important public servants. Je veux d'abord, avant de vous faire la présentation du ministre du Commerce international pour le Canada et le ministre également responsable de la région Asie-Pacifique, vous dire à quel point nous sommes heureux de vous recevoir chez nous au Canada et dans la ville de Toronto, et vous dire à quel point notre regard est porté vers l'Afrique, comme c'est le cas pour le monde entier depuis quelques années maintenant. C'est donc pour moi, comme ancien politicien, maintenant avocat pratiquant chez McCarthy-Tétrault et commanditaire de l'événement aujourd'hui, un honneur de me joindre à vous. So I've been given this very, very pleasant task. As Jean alluded to, I'm presenting someone who's active in politics. I'm a former politician. He was a former official for Ed Fast, former from the province of Quebec. So now we're going to present someone who's actually in the thick of things and doing something. And we're honored by the presence of a number of ministers that I'd like to also recognize today and thank them for their presence. And I'm going to go right on to the task by first pointing out that our speaker today is a lawyer by training, which is a very good thing. It starts very well. And he practiced corporate and commercial law for 24 years. And Ed Fast is from the province of British Columbia, from the area of Abbotsford. He was first elected to the House of Commons in 2006, re-elected in 2008, re-elected in 2011 also. And in 2011, he was given responsibility by Prime Minister Stephen Harper for the Department of International Trade. Now, to understand how important he is and how relevant his work is to everything that we have been discussing here in the last 2 days, it's also relevant to point out that this government has given its minister an extremely and historic mission in regards to trade agreements and to presenting Canada to the rest of the world. You will not have forgotten that Canada, with a population of 35 million people, is very much a trade-oriented country. And Mr. Fast has been given the most ambitious pro-trade and pro-investment plan in the history of the country. So that speaks volumes of the responsibilities that he has. He also recently released Canada's first international education strategy as Canada hosts students from all over the world. He oversaw negotiations on the Canada-Europe Trade Agreement, a historic agreement in many, many respects, not only because of the relationship between Canada and Europe, but also because of the depth of the agreement and how significant it is. It's literally a new generation of agreements. Et les Canadiens, Monsieur le Ministre, sont extrêmement fiers de cette réussite qui vous est directement attribuable à vous, au Premier ministre Harper et à votre gouvernement, de la négociation d'une nouvelle entente Canada-Europe. Minister Fast is now overseeing trade negotiations with Japan, with India, and also through the Trans-Pacific Partnership. He also was at the helm when Canada recently concluded an agreement with South Korea, our first major trade agreement in the area of the Asia-Pacific. There are 12 sub-Saharan African countries. Thank you. Congratulations, Minister. There are a number of sub-Saharan African countries that are priority markets for Canadian trade in goods. And we all have rejoiced in the recent rise of Africa on the international stage in the area of trade and many, many other areas. There's also foreign investment protection agreements that Canada has signed and negotiated in the region, and a number of them have been concluded, a number of them are being negotiated. The point, I guess, is that we remain very, very active. So Minister Fass has led 3 sector-based trade missions to Africa since 2011. And some of them I'm familiar with have all been extremely successful. So Minister, I'm delighted to have the privilege of introducing you today and to thanking you on behalf of Canadians for the outstanding work you have done for Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, Minister Ed Fast.
Well, thank you, Jean, for that introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, a real pleasure to be here. Bonjour, chers amis. And then to Jean Gauthier, I wanted to correct you. I am not your former boss. We were former colleagues on a very good team that continues to do good work. So thank you. And I'm pleased to have this opportunity to speak to you about Canada's deepening commitment to engage with countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And I'm heartened to see this turnout, especially from the private sector, both African and Canadian. And I did also want to acknowledge the presence here of a number of ministers from African countries. I'm so pleased that you're here. I'm pleased that I was able to meet with you today. And I know as we continue to develop personal ties, that will also help generate a deepening trade and investment relationship. If we truly want to increase long-term prosperity, not only in Canada, but across the African continent, it's important that we bring business together with potential partners to explore and seize the mutually beneficial opportunities that are out there. And that's what this summit is all about. And I hope that this is only the first of many more to come. Now, you have all spent the last 4 days here in the heart of Toronto, one of Canada's most dynamic cities, and you've been exploring the vast economic potential that is waiting to be tapped in the Canada-Africa Economic Partnership. Now, in that context, allow me to share some thoughts about the potential that I see and what Government of Canada is doing to help make sure that potential is realized. Since becoming Canada's Minister of International Trade, I've been able to lead some 3 trade missions. The first one was actually to Libya, and that was quite an experience for me, as you can imagine. But since then, I've also led trade missions to Burkina Faso, Madagascar, South Africa, Tanzania, Nigeria, Ghana, and I can assure you there are more to come. In fact, we've had conversations this morning about visiting a number of other countries in Africa that are of great interest to Canada. On all of these trips, in my meetings with politicians, government officials, and business people, I've seen firsthand the energy and optimism that is sweeping the African continent. Now, the statistics will tell you that Africa is one of the fastest growing economic regions in the world. According to the International Monetary Fund, 6 of the world's 15 fastest growing economies are in sub-Saharan Africa. The IMF also expects the sub-Saharan African economy to grow by between 5 and 6% over the next several years. But raw numbers hardly do justice to the economic and social development taking place. Africa's middle class, for example, continues to expand, creating a very real and positive impact on the livelihoods of a rapidly growing number of people. In fact, a recent study by South Africa's Standard Bank suggested that the number of middle-class households in 11 sub-Saharan African countries has tripled since the year 2000. And that number is only expected to increase in coming years, from 15 million today to more than 40 million by 2030. A huge opportunity for Canada and its companies. And I want to assure you that we believe that Canada does fit into that picture in a number of ways. As you all know, Canadian businesses are already playing an important role in Africa, helping to create jobs and economic growth across the continent. Canada's development assistance, meanwhile, is helping to reduce poverty throughout the region. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that improving the health of mothers, newborns, and children is a top priority for Canada. You'll likely hear more about that later on today from my colleague, Minister Christian Paradis. Now, at the Saving Every Woman, Every Child Summit, which was held in Toronto in May of this year, Prime Minister Harper announced Canada's commitment of $3.5 billion to improve the health of mothers and children over the next 5 years, supporting global efforts to end the preventable deaths of mothers, of newborn, and of young children. Now, Canada's geographic investments focus on countries with high child and maternal mortality rates, countries that have demonstrated that they can make progress on maternal, newborn, and child health. In these countries, including some in Africa, Canada works to increase access to health centres at the local level and ensure their sustainability over the long term. And furthermore, at the 5th Congrès Mondial Acadien last month, my colleague, Minister Paradis, highlighted Canada's efforts to promote economic development in developing Francophonie countries, many of whom are represented here. He also announced Canada's contribution to the International Committee of the Red Cross to meet the emergency humanitarian needs of people in West Africa. Indeed, as I survey the relationship between Canada and the countries of Africa, I see a trade and development partnership that will continue to flourish, and that is very good news for all of us. Now, on the trade side, and of course trade is my passion as the Minister responsible for trade and investment for Canada. And it all starts with Canada's Global Markets Action Plan, or GMAP as we call it. GMAP is our government's blueprint for creating jobs and economic prosperity through exports. Under this plan, we've committed to do everything in our power to support Canadian companies operating overseas and to encourage new companies to expand into foreign markets like those in Africa. And just as an aside, some of you shared with me this morning that you would like to see more of Canada and Africa. And our Global Markets Action Plan actually shifts the focus to Africa. And you can expect that over the next few years, our government will be providing extra support, especially to small and medium-sized businesses who are looking to finally step over that line and export beyond North America. That's been a challenge because we as Canadians tend to be risk-averse and a highly cautious lot, and it takes something to push us over the line to explore new markets, and we're hoping GMAP will actually achieve that goal. Chief among our key sectors under GMAP, of course, would be our extractive industry. That would be mining and oil and gas. And Canada is a world leader in technology in that area. In fact, when it comes to mining, no one does it better than Canada. Canada is the undisputed leader in that sector. And of course, in many parts of Africa, this is a very significant industry that can drive prosperity. Like Canada, many of the countries in Africa are, of course, incredibly blessed with a wealth of natural resources. And since our companies are the world leaders with top-notch technology and sustainable and ethical business practices, we're encouraging them to become more and more engaged on the continent. Our government will continue to support the extractive industry and promote corporate social responsibility to our companies and within multilateral fora. And I'll have a little more to say about that later. But to focus exclusively on extractives would be to overlook a range of other sectors, from sustainable technology to infrastructure to education, that hold incredible promise within Africa. In the infrastructure sector, for example, African countries are facing a particularly pressing challenge when it comes to transportation, when it comes to energy. Unless more roads and ports are built, more pipelines, unless capacity and electricity expands, economic growth and productivity for many, many millions will be stillborn. Now, according to the 2013 World Energy Issues Monitor, which, by the way, is published by the World Energy Council, only 1/3 of the population of sub-Saharan Africa has access to electricity. This report also cites energy efficiency, renewable energy, and energy pricing as key issues that require immediate attention in Africa. Now, I know that African leaders have been among the first to recognize these challenges, and they're tackling this issue on a number of fronts, including mobilizing financing and galvanizing political will. But Canadian companies can help in this effort. The recently formed Canada-Africa Power Alliance is just one example. The alliance was formed this past May by 9 Canadian companies in partnership with our Canadian Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, and also in partnership with one of the agencies I'm responsible for, Export Development Canada. Its goal is to help African countries meet their growing power imperatives while increasing the presence of Canadian companies in the African power sector, particularly in hydro and other renewable energy, where Canada is a world leader. Renewable energy sources such as hydro and solar power generate nearly 20% of our total primary energy supply. In fact, Canada is the world's third largest producer of hydropower, generating nearly 400 terawatt-hours per year. In fact, in my home province of British Columbia, 86% of all our electricity is generated by hydro. In addition, there are nearly 650 solar companies working in Canada, including sales companies, product manufacturers, project developers, and systems installers. And some of you, I know, are very aware of Canada's expertise in that area. As world-class corporate citizens committed to sharing their knowledge and expertise with developing countries, Canadian companies can and will bring greater prosperity to our friends and partners throughout Africa. Equally important, Canadian involvement in these sectors often involves working closely with local employees and managers. Canadians are also well known for facilitating skills and knowledge transfer, which is key to sustainable infrastructure development. In fact, one of the points I made earlier today in one of my bilateral meetings was that perhaps more so than most countries in the world, Canadian companies understand the value of knowledge transfer and how critical it is to building capacity on the ground in countries like those in Africa. Manitoba Hydro International is leading the way as a major Canadian player in Africa, having provided consulting, utility asset management, and training services in more than 50 projects across the African continent. One of these projects is a management contract with the Nigerian Ministry of Power for the Transmission Company of Nigeria. Crucially, Manitoba Hydro will also focus on transferring technology and developing the capacity and capability of local personnel. And you will find that particularly in the context of long-term partnerships, Canadian companies are indeed willing to localize production and engage in knowledge transfer. And this is important because for Africa to truly reach its full economic potential, it's essential for the African people to be empowered, to be provided with the tools to create their own prosperity. And there's perhaps no more powerful tool for individual empowerment than education. Even outside of specific companies and specific projects, Canada sees education as a significant part of our past, present, and future relationship with African countries. As part of our GMAP, that plan I talked about earlier, our government launched the International Education Strategy, which seeks to strengthen Canada's position as a destination of choice to study and conduct world-class research. In fact, this is the first time Canada has ever released a national strategy on international education. Some of you who know Canada know that jurisdiction and responsibility for education actually rests with our provinces. But we've collaborated with all of the provinces and territories to come up with a national strategy to promote Canada's knowledge advantage, to share that with the world. And it's not only about attracting students from abroad, it's also about Canadian educational institutions investing in educational expertise right on the ground, some of our key trading partners, especially in Africa. A number of Government of Canada initiatives are taking place in Africa as part of our international education strategy, including education fairs and institution-specific initiatives to support African educational institutions and their students. In addition to that strategy, Prime Minister Stephen Harper announced last December the creation of the African Leaders of Tomorrow Scholarship Fund, as well as a commitment of $5 million over 5 years in memory of Nelson Mandela. The goal of the fund is to provide high-quality training while exposing future African leaders, especially women, to Canadian best practices in areas such as governance, public policy, innovation, and administration. And more recently, our government also announced the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Scholarships Program, which will grant graduate-level scholarships to Commonwealth students, including many from Africa. The truth is that Canada wants to attract more students from African countries, and our efforts are bearing fruit. The number of students from sub-Saharan Africa is growing annually. Today, that number stands at around 13,000 students. I know we can increase that significantly. African international students enrich the Canadian communities and institutions in which they study and conduct research. And of course, when they return home, not only do they invest their newly acquired skills in building their communities, and here's the bonus, they also become Canada's best ambassadors abroad. African countries benefit tremendously from an increasingly educated, knowledgeable, and well-trained population, which will be a critical factor in driving sustained economic growth. But friends, as we continue to deepen Canada's engagement in Africa, I would be remiss if I didn't highlight two trade initiatives in particular that reflect our commitment to use trade and investment as the twin engines to help economic growth on the continent. The first one, Canada is working to strengthen its commercial relationships with African countries by negotiating, as Jean earlier mentioned, foreign investment promotion and protection agreements. These bilateral investment treaties, or FIPAs as we call them, they're also called BITs in various parts of the world, they provide Canadian investors with the confidence that their investments will be protected and will be free from discriminatory practices. The greater the transparency and predictability of the investment environment, the greater the flow of Canadian investment and capital into African countries. And many have already taken up Canada's offer to engage. In fact, just last year alone, 7 different African countries concluded and finalized FIPAs with us. There are there's probably a dozen others that are presently negotiating with us, and we welcome that. We look forward to concluding those as well. Invariably, when a FIPA is brought into force, investment flows increase significantly. In Africa, we expect investment flows to increase in sectors such as infrastructure, transportation, education, mining, oil and gas, as a result of getting these agreements in place. Now, the second initiative is that we are engaged in an ongoing, sustained, and persistent trade promotion strategy for Africa. Essentially, what we're doing is ramping up the number of trade missions that we will be sending to this region of the world. Of course, our trade missions are very focused. They're focused on a number of key sectors. Typically, we bring 20 to 30 companies along. Some of you have participated on those trade missions. And we try to be focused on the sectors because we want to make sure we expose our Canadian companies not only to the key decision makers, but also to key partners in that new market that can improve their prospects of success. And of course, I want to make sure they have face time with me as I lead those trade missions. And of course, many of my ministerial colleagues also lead trade missions all around the world. And I mentioned some of the countries I've already visited. And just today, we talked to a number of other countries who are interested in hosting our trade missions. And you can expect I will be back very, very soon. Now, friends, one of the key things we do as a trade department is we have this group of professionals, trade professionals called trade commissioners. And they are really the jewel in the crown of what I do as trade minister. They make me look good, but they're the ones who actually do this work on the ground. These are trade professionals which we have all around the world, across Canada, about 1,000 of them, in 150 offices around the world. And what they do is they help Canadian companies to find new markets, and when they get to those markets, they help them with the intelligence on the regulatory environment, the business environment, some of the high-level legal challenges that that new market might present. They will match you up with those partners I talked about earlier They can do troubleshooting for you. And they also work with foreign companies that want to partner with Canadians. They can actually, again, do that matching with Canadian companies to really maximize the potential in our economic relationship. And then finally, I should mention another tool, and we have representatives from this organization here today. That's Export Development Canada. This is Canada's export financing agency, which provides financing solutions and also insurance solutions for Canadian companies that are looking to do business abroad. So say you're worried about getting paid for the contract that you're going to enter into. It may be that Export Development Canada has an insurance solution to insure the receivables that you expect to receive. They can also insure you against political risk, and there's a whole suite of products that EDC provides. Take advantage of that as you look at opportunities all around the world, especially on the African continent. And I would mention, EDC recently announced that they will be opening up its first office in Africa. It'll be located in Joburg in South Africa, and we look forward to seeing EDC expand its footprint and its services in Africa. One other tool I should mention, and that is the Canadian Commercial Corporation. There are some of you that are going to want to do business with a foreign government, especially in Africa. The CCC is Canada's government-to-government procurement agency that can help you as a Canadian company do business with that government. Essentially what CCC does, it provides you and the purchaser of your product or service with a sovereign guarantee that you will deliver on the product or service that you've committed to deliver. And it also, of course, removes middlemen from the process, enhances transparency, and is a tool that can very significantly improve your prospects of success in doing business around the world. Now, thus far, I've talked mostly about Canada's trade partnership with Africa, but let's not forget about the other half of the equation, that is development. Now, as I mentioned earlier, my colleague Christian Paradis, who is the Minister for International Development and La Francophonie, will have more to say this afternoon about Canada's development efforts in Africa. But suffice it to say that Canada places just as much importance on the development side of our partnership as on the trade and investment side. And I would mention, recently our government made the decision to bring development under the umbrella of foreign affairs. So now we have foreign affairs, trade, and development all working together in partnership to leverage the investments Canada makes abroad to achieve even greater value for those investments that are made. Ladies and gentlemen, when you partner with Canadian companies, you are choosing a partner that is guided by Canadian values, values that promote and defend democracy, freedom, human rights, the rule of law, social development, and of course prosperity as vital elements of a vibrant and forward-looking society. That is our wish for all of our trading partners. And those values are reflected in Canada's corporate social responsibility practices, CSR as we all know it as. Canadian companies understand that CSR is not only good for people and communities, it is good for the bottom line for companies. After all, CSR practices can add value, create new opportunities, and help companies earn the social license essential for success. Now, it's clear to me that Canadian companies, including those in the energy and extractive sectors, recognize the importance of CSR and that the vast majority conduct their international operations in a responsible manner. One recent success story that I'd like to highlight is a $50 million contract signed by a Canadian independent power producer called Windiga Energy, whose representatives are here, to build a solar power plant in Zina, Burkina Faso. And this project will include a community development segment involving the electrification of a number of rural villages in the area. Another example of Canadians doing right when they invest abroad is Sky Power Global's donation of 5,000 solar-powered lights to South African villages that are without electricity. And they've done this so that children within those communities can have light for reading and writing in the evenings. Those kids are going to school, but they only have part of the day in which to study because there's no electricity, there's no lighting. This is going to help change that. Today, the Government of Canada actively fosters and promotes sustainable development to our companies. And this approach includes government support of responsible and transparent Canadian oil, gas, and mining operations in Africa. It also includes working with host countries to develop indigenous capacities to manage their natural resources in a sustainable and responsible way that also helps to enrich and empower local communities. In short, I will conclude, our government is committed to creating the right conditions and putting the right tools in place for Canadian businesses to explore new opportunities, diversify their markets, and compete and win on the global stage, including in Africa. And how do I know they'll compete and win? Because Canadian companies do so each and every day. More importantly, our government's expectation of Canadian companies is that when they do business abroad, they do so in accordance with the highest ethical standards, the highest environmental standards, and that they reinvest in the very communities in which they do business. Our partnerships must be win-wins for both commercial success and community building. That is, after all, the Canada brand that I wish to promote, that Canada wishes to promote. Friends, the future is bright for Canada's engagement with Africa and for our shared trade and development partnership. Our government will continue to work hard to strengthen our partnerships across the continent to help African countries and the African people achieve their goals of creating economic opportunities and long-term prosperity. Thank you very much. Merci à tous.